Buenos días, buenas tardes, Nora. Hola, Martín, looking great, Carlos. Hi, Yesenia. Hello, Claudia. Un gran saludo. Great greetings to the state of Illinois. It's a beautiful opportunity to be able to be with you this afternoon and to be able to not only talk a little bit about my story, but to also talk about the generational power of higher education. Me da una gran alegría y un gran honor y un gran orgullo el poder conectarme con cada uno de ustedes. It's a great honor to be able to be with you, to be able to share a little bit about my story, a little bit about who I am, and to be able to not only tell you a little bit about who I am, because this is not a pre-recorded session. This is a moment in life right now. We are right now sharing our hearts, connecting, to be able to talk about not only how I made it here, but my goal today is to be able to talk about the beautiful responsibility of what it is to be a first generation college student, of what it is to be able to see higher education as a way of hope. Así que me enorgullece conectarme con ustedes. It's a beautiful opportunity that I cannot even begin to describe, of how humble, of how grateful I am to be able to be with every single one of you. So Melissa, thank you so much to you, to your great and incredible leadership team that has given me an opportunity and the trust to be able to share my heart and to be able to not only talk about my story, but the stories of our communities, and to talk about the stories of strength. And the reason why I want to talk about my story is not so that you feel sad. It's not so that you feel like, oh my God, what did he experience? Like, wow, why did he go through those things? But none of it would make sense. Like, it wouldn't make sense if I told you what higher education means to me if you don't understand where it is that I come from. So that's why it's important for me to be able to tell you the things that I have experienced in life, the things that I have to endure to be able to value education the way that I do. Education is power. And an education has changed my life, and it has changed the life of my entire generations. So it's an honor to be with you. It's an honor to be able to share my story and to share how higher education has transformed my life as a first generation student, but not only to myself, but that to the people that I love the most in my future generations. You see, my name is Jose Luis Zelaya. I'm originally from Honduras, and I just recently finished a PhD here at Texas A&M University. But none of that would make sense. I would just be another PhD person who just completed that level of degree if you don't understand how education transformed me. It completely changed the way that I see the world, because of people that cared about me, because of people that stopped along the way to help me understand that in this journey, I was not alone. You see, you're a first generation student. You care about your families. You care about your sisters, your brothers. You care about your community. But I just want you to know that people also care about you. That people are also consistently going to sleep late and waking up early every single day to assure that you, as a first generation college student, that you have opportunities to succeed. And I tell you that because my story is not an example story, but it's a reflection of what it is possible and what we are capable of doing and achieving whenever we have great systems of support. It wouldn't make sense if I told you that I have a master's in English as a second language if you didn't know that I was undocumented and that I couldn't work. It wouldn't make sense to you if I told you that I finished a bachelor's in math and science if you didn't understand that I grew up in a trash field. It wouldn't make sense to you that if I told you that I got an associate's degree from a community college and that I found hope in education if you don't understand that my mom used to sell tamales and clean offices. So I want you to understand my roots so that you can have a greater appreciation for the fruits. You see, oftentimes we would go through this life and people would love your glory. They would want your success, but they won't want your story. They won't want your pain. So I welcome you into what is not able to be portrayed. I welcome you into what is invisible, because this is what you see. This is what you see. But what you don't see is my heart. What you don't see is the experiences that got me to this point. Even though you only see me by myself right here, in reality, I'm not alone. My viejita is with me. My stepfather is me. My community is with me. The people that empower and inspire me to be able to understand that my past did not define my future are with me. So I know that I made it here because I was not alone. You are not alone in this journey. People love you. People care about you, and they're going to make sure that you make it, because your success is their responsibility. And that's what this event was created, to be able to not highlight my story, but to be able to utilize this image as a reflection of your own potential, of your own capacity, and what you're also able of doing, because I don't believe that I'm extraordinary. I just followed an equation that worked for me. Education changed my life. You see, because it wasn't always like this. In fact, I'm from San Pedro Sula, Honduras. And if maybe you understand a little bit about San Pedro Sula, Honduras, you come to realize that reality is very different. You see, I'm not here to talk about a sad story or a story of pain. I just want you to understand the genesis of how it all started. I just want you to understand the beginnings. I just want you to understand how the center of why it is that I'm so appreciative to higher education, and why it is that I respect you and I admire you and I applaud you for your own individual journey as you keep on going through this process of pursuing a higher education degree. And as I share my story, just know that the higher education is power. And that if it changed my life, it could also change your life. You see, I was born in San Pedro Sula and under extreme levels of poverty. But whenever we talk about poverty in the United States, it's a very, very vague concept, because you can be poor in the United States and make $30,000, $40,000 a year based on income and how many people live in your household. But whenever you live under what is called absolute levels of poverty, which have been considered by the United Nations as individuals or families who work an entire day labor and still make between $2 and $5 a day, yet the capitalist reality of the economy continues to be one where 12 gallons of eggs is almost $3, where a gallon of milk is more than $3, where a pound of rice is almost $2. So whenever you live under those realities, where a capitalist society yet absolute levels of poverty continue to oppress you, you end up under that reality. So oftentimes people in Honduras, which by the way, statistically speaking, 2 out of 3 people that live in Honduras live under absolute levels of poverty. So what I was experiencing is not something that I lived or that I experienced or that I went through because my family didn't care, but it was the reality. It was a social construct. It was the culture in which we had to live. But poverty didn't just hurt me. Poverty didn't just cause in me realities and memories of a trash field, because you see, I lived in a trash field. And I remember whenever I lived in that trash field, it was miles and miles and miles of trash field. But you see, I remember as a little kid, whenever there would be this big, like trucks, like trash trucks, and they would come and they would dump the trash in these trash fields. I remember as a little kid, we would get out of our chanties. We would get out of these little chocitas where we used to live. And we used to go where those piles of trash were at. And we would dig into those piles of trash, and we would look into those piles of trash, because that was our way to be able to find something to be able to strengthen the chocita in which we lived. See, many of you are in college today. Many of you have an opportunity to be in the United States today. Maybe my story is not that far away from your own story. Maybe you also migrated to this country and understand the realities that I'm talking about. Or maybe it was your parents that migrated for a better opportunity so that you can have an opportunity to an education. And education provides us an opportunity to be able to bring pride to the same pains that our families come from. I remember whenever I was 5 years old and I walked into that little casita where I used to live, that little shanty. You see, in that place, we didn't have electricity or furniture, no refrigerators. I remember whenever I walked in that place, my mother was holding my little brother who was Noecito. Noecito was about 2 years old. And at the age of 5 years old, I had to experience how my brother passed away due to an asthma attack. You see, every single day that I leave my house, I make sure that I take with me at least $2 to be reminded that if the day that my little brother passed away, I could have had those $2. My brother would be with me. I would give up everything I ever gained in this world. I would give up my car, my house, my clothing, so that my brother can be with me, but poverty took him away from me. That's why I find hope in education, because whenever I meet students across the nation who want to be doctors, who want to be nurses, who want to work in the medical field, that inspires me and it gives me hope in education, because an education has an opportunity to be able to bring solutions to the same problems that our communities have experienced. Education is power. Education is transformational. I'm not here to talk about a sad story. I'm here to talk about how an education changed me, how an education gave me a different perspective in society, and how I'm able to go through this world not acting as a victim or walking with my hands like this, always protecting myself, but instead I now walk like this, trying to pay it forward and trying to realize how can this education that life has given me be able to provide more opportunities for our communities and our families. You see, I remember whenever I was 5, 6, 7 years old, I experienced poverty differently. In fact, if you begin to Google and research San Pedro Sula, Honduras, you will come to find out that it was considered, that it was deemed as the most dangerous city outside of war zone based on percentages of people who were losing their lives due to the violence in Honduras. So the violence that I experienced in Honduras was not very uncommon to me. I experienced it since a very young age, given that the culture, statistically speaking, you can backtrack it. You can backtrack it to the 80s and understand that Honduras went through a civil war. You can backtrack it to the late 90s and understand that Honduras went through a natural disaster and understand the policies that led to such poverty, such violence, such destructions. So whenever you're a kid and you're growing up in that environment, it's very difficult. So to be able to be who I am today, I can tell you that an education can also change your life. That an education also provided me an opportunity to be able to advance not only my individual's aspirations, but those of my families and my communities. To be able to understand that what it is permanent, what will not change, is the power of higher education. That what goes inside your brain, no one can take away. That the greatest strength that you have is that one that it's invisible. So keep pursuing your dreams. Keep on going. Do not stop. And as you go through this journey, just know that you're not alone. That despite of where you come from or where you have experience, you are not alone. Student Services is here for you. Your community college is here for you. Advisors are here for you. Figures of authority are here for you. And they want to make sure that you succeed, that you make it, because it is the responsibilities, not only for you to make it, but to be able to improve our community. So if you make it, it creates an impact that you have no idea the type of impact that it would create. I just hope that through my story, you're able to reflect a little bit of what higher education can do for your life. I remember as a young kid, whenever I was 7 years old, I was on my way to school. And that was the first time I was stabbed on my head for the first time because of the violence. And whenever I remember living in an environment where my father wasn't home because drugs and alcoholism took him away from me and created a very dysfunctional family. And because of those realities, and because of that pain, and in addition to in year 1998, Hurricane Mitch, a Category 5 hurricane, caused extreme devastation to the country. But now imagine this. Imagine living in that trash field. Whenever there are no text messages, no Facebook notifications, no meteorologists telling you through a platform of a TV that there will be a hurricane and that you need to find refuge. But instead, in the middle of the night, whenever you are afraid and wondering what would happen, rain starts pouring and pouring and pouring, and the rain never stops. And I remember in the middle of the night how my mother grabbed my younger sister, and we escaped the trash field, looking for refuge, looking for carreteras, for other roads that would be able to find refuge for us. And I remember whenever we got to those places, there were so many people who were running away from the floods, from the rivers who had like overflown. It was a crazy natural disaster that caused a lot of desperation in people's lives. And because of the hurricane, my mother had to make a decision, and that was to migrate to the United States, to leave, to escape. Not only because of the hurricane, but because of the poverty. But it was because it was better to maybe take a journey and fail in that journey than to continue failing and not knowing if you're going to survive the next day. The natural disaster, it was a matter of desperation, no water, no food, no clothing. And my mother had to make a very difficult decision. She had to sacrifice the concept of us being together for the concept of a life, not even a better life, but the concept of a life. And because my mother didn't have enough resources, because we lived under absolute levels of poverty, my mother had to only migrate to the United States with my younger sister. And I stayed behind in Honduras. as a street child. I couldn't go back to the trash field. And all of a sudden, I remember one day whenever my mother was leaving to Guatemala and we went to a bus terminal and we just said goodbye to the bus. And I didn't know if I would ever see my mother again or if I would ever see my sister again. And my mother migrated to the United States. If you were born in this country, just know that there have been sacrifices made before you so that you can have an opportunity to be where you are right now. If you come from another country, just know that it is possible, que sí se puede, que hay que ponerse pilas, que hay que echarle ganas. Education is power. Education is transformation. And education will change your life and that of your family and your communities. You see, after my mother migrated to the United States, I lived in Honduras. And my mother made it to Houston, Texas, after about a week of traveling in caravans. And she made it to an old women's shelter in Houston, where she was living because she couldn't really afford to live like in her own apartment or like a house on her own because she was working like $20, $30 a day as an undocumented immigrant in the United States. And I stayed behind in Honduras. And all of a sudden I started sleeping in parks. I started sleeping in stadiums. I remember whenever I was a kid and I would sleep in stadiums that the militaries would come. And with their AK-47s, they would hit us on our legs and they would break our legs because we were seen as something that needed to be social cleans. We were seen as dirty. We were seen as street children that didn't need to be alive. And I remember as a little kid in the middle of the night just running away from them. You see, I'm only 33 years old, but in my body, I already have 14 surgeries, including an entire nose reconstruction. They had to remove my tonsils and my uvula because in the middle of the night, I would choke in my own sleep. I have 8 screws that hold my right knee and 22 stitches on the bottom of my left foot that remind me to be grateful in life, that remind me to appreciate the things that I have now because I understand what it is not to have them. And I understand now the impact of what it is to have them. So I stayed in Honduras, and for about 2 years, it was very difficult. I remember sleeping in stadiums and selling candies and selling gums. I remember getting inside of buses and singing to people and then asking for money. I remember going into restaurants and looking into trash fields to be able to find food. And I remember that whenever I was 13 years old, after 2 years of living in Honduras, I was simply playing soccer because I love playing soccer. I mean, soccer to me, I love playing soccer. I might have surgeries and screws, but I'm still doing a chilena. You know what I mean? Like I'm still like playing soccer. Like soccer to me, I still love playing soccer. I'm not going to be in the bench. I'm going to be playing soccer even though my knees hurt because I love playing soccer. It's a thing that I had as a kid in Honduras. And I remember whenever I was a kid in Honduras and I was playing soccer at the age of 13, there was a drive-by shooting. But I was used to them. I was used to drive-by shooting. I was used to seeing them in schools. I was used to seeing them in hospitals, in our communities, because of the level of violence that we experience. But whenever I was 13 years old and I'm playing soccer and I hear the shooting happen, what did I do? I do what I did every single time. I dropped to the floor. I crawled. I started finding a bush so that I could find rescue. But this time I wasn't fast enough. And at the age of 13 years old, I had to experience how both of my arms were shot after a drive-by shooting, after simply playing soccer. I'm 13. You see this is what you see. But what you don't see is how an education has served as a method of therapy. How an education has provided me a different sense of hope in humanity. How an education has helped me understand how I can actually find solutions to the same problems. My dream is to one day return to Honduras and clean entire trash fields and cut ribbons and turn them into schools. Now you can understand why I'm so passionate about higher education. Because an education changed me. Because an education provided me a different sense of seeing the world. And it provided me a sense of hope for my family and my loved ones. After the shooting happened, I made a journey to the United States as an unaccompanied minor. The same way that you see on the news, the children that migrated. I remember walking the desert and sleeping in mountains. You see the little things that the Europe probably don't think about. Imagine walking a desert, looking on the ground, and all of a sudden looking at a scorpion right next to you. Or sleeping in the middle of the mountains and waking up with your entire face numb because you slept in a pile of ants and ants bit you and you just like completely went numb. Or whenever it rains and you have no umbrella, or the bottom of your shoes just fall off and you still got to keep on walking with the bottom of your feet. Or whenever you run out of water, but yet you don't run out of passion and you keep going through that odyssey. As a 13-year-old kid, I rode the train. And eventually I made it to the Rio Grande. And I'm not going to lie to you. Whenever I made it to the Rio Grande, I didn't think that I was breaking a law. I didn't understand the complexity of what was happening because in the back of my head, as soon as I make it to the United States, as soon as I reach American soil, my mother was going to appear from somewhere because I was in the United States. I was going to see my sister and like life was going to change because I was in the United States. And I remember whenever I saw the river, what I honestly saw was the reflection of my mother. And whenever I saw that, I jumped into the river and I swam across. And I remember this turbulence carrying me through. And I remember all of a sudden when I made it to the other side of the river, I remember seeing like una arena, sand. And in this sand, there were like bags left behind, clothing left behind, water bottles left behind, clothing left behind of people that had come before me. And I'm not going to lie to you. I remember in those moments that I started feeling so sad because I started looking around and my mother wasn't there. And I started screaming, Mama, Mama, Mama. And I don't know if this ever happened to you. But I remember feeling so much pain that I cried so much that I put myself to sleep because my mother wasn't with me. Because I was in the United States and my mother wasn't with me. I couldn't understand it. And I remember a man on a green uniform waking me up, and it was an immigration patrol. And this immigration patrol, I remember treating me with compassion and with humanity, the same way that we should treat refugee and unaccompanied minors. And I was raised from the ground and I was picked up and I was then placed inside of a patrol car, an immigration car. I was then taken into a detention center where I lived for about 2 months. Every single day, I was so afraid that I would be deported back to Honduras. Every single day, I was so afraid whether or not I was going to be reunified with my mother. The level of pain and the level of trauma associated with coming from a different country and experiencing these things, believe me, they can be beaten. You can surpass them. An education can provide you an opportunity to make you realize that you are not alone. Maybe you have experienced many dramatic experiences. You are not alone. Tú sí puedes. Usted sí puede. Yes, you can. Yes, you can do it. Eres un guerrero, eres una guerrera. Eres poderoso, eres poderosa because it's within your family. Because the sacrifices made before us are probably too painful that your parents would never describe them to you. I'm only 33. And what I know is that my story is not that far away from yours. And I remember one day I was in the detention center and an immigration officer came and told me, number 7, let's go, because I was number 7. And then all of a sudden, they put me inside of another patrol car. And then they took me to another detention center in Fresno, Texas. Whenever we got to the other detention center, I remember the officer told me to close my eyes and he opened the door of a building and he told me to walk in. And whenever I walked into that other detention center, I remember having some papers in my hands. I remember that I was afraid because I didn't know what was going to happen with me. But I remember whenever I walked into that detention center, in the very horizon, there was a lady, a very, very beautiful lady with a very beautiful red lipstick and a very beautiful red dress. And as soon as I saw her, like I sprinted towards her and I hugged her. And it was my mom. It was my mother. I was reunified with my mother. Like, I didn't come to the United States to become Dr. Zelaya. I didn't come to the United States to be able to reach the mountaintop of education. And education changed me. I'm still that same kid that lost his brother in a trash field. And education changed me. I'm still that kid that experienced trauma and psychological pain due to poverty and violence, but an education changed me. It gave me hope. And continues to give me hope every single day to understand that we are not alone, que no estás sola, que no estás solo, that we can do this, that we deserve to be successful, that our communities deserve to be successful because we have experienced pain. And an education gives you an opportunity to rewrite the story of your families and to create a generational impact to where our future generations would only hear the echo of our pain, but would never experience that very painful reality. Education is power. I remember whenever I was reunified with my mother, because I was allowed to stay in the United States due to fear of persecution within my own nation and to begin a political asylum case in the United States. And we got into a Greyhound bus into Houston, Texas. And we went to Houston, Texas. And I remember whenever I got to Houston, Texas, and I'm not gonna lie to you, I'm gonna be straight up honest. I'm gonna be like straight up honest. I remember getting to Houston, Texas, and all of a sudden, like seeing those big buildings, like those big towers. And I remember seeing a bridge here, one here, two here. Like I was like, what in the world is this? I had never seen anything like that. I come from a trash field. And all of a sudden I get to Houston at 2 in the morning. I saw those towers. I'm not gonna lie to you. I thought I was gonna see Godzilla pop out of one of those towers. I thought I was gonna see like Minnie Mouse and Mickey Mouse. I thought I was gonna see like Popeye giving me some spinach to get stronger because I was in the United States. Like, oh my God, are you serious? Like, where is Scooby-Doo? Like, whoa, wow, what a beautiful culture. And then we get out of the bus and my mom calls for a taxi and she like goes like this and she calls for the taxi stops, and then my mom starts speaking English. And I was like, wait a minute. Obviamente no en español, no en inglés, ¿verdad? En español. I was like she started speaking English and I was like, le pegó la chiripiorca. Like, what is she saying, right? Like what in the world? Like she was communicating in a different language. And all of a sudden, they took us to what would become my first home in the United States, which was a 1-bedroom apartment. Because remember that I had told you that my mother was living at an immigration shelter with all women. So whenever I arrived in the United States and my mother had to go get me at the detention center, my mother had to find another apartment where we could live. But my mother was still not making a lot of money. So my mother was able to find a 1-bedroom apartment that she shared with all 4 other families. And I remember arriving on December the 8th in year 2000. And I remember knocking on this one door. And I knocked on the door and this little girl opened the door. And it was my sister. And I hugged my sister. Hermanita. Mi niña. Just like that. And I hugged her, and it was such a beautiful thing. And we walked into that apartment. 1-bedroom apartment that we shared with 4 other families. But that day I remember with my mom in that apartment, there was no dining tables. There was no sofas. Everything was beds, because that's where immigrants live, especially people that first arrived in the United States. Everybody packs up. There were people living in the restrooms. There were people living, like the master's room was like 3 beds, one like this, and one like this. Like everybody lived there. People were coming in and out. And I remember the first day in that apartment, just hugging my mom and just hugging my sister. Little did I know how difficult it would be, because I thought I had made it. I was in the United States. But what did I know about learning a new language? What did I know about being a first-generation college student? What did I know about graduating from high school? I didn't know those things. But an education provided me hope. I remember coming into the United States on a Monday, and on a Tuesday, my mother had already enrolled me in school. I remember showing up to school. And all of a sudden, like, Like I remember seeing teachers and seeing students and seeing classrooms, and I saw the school and I was like, oh my God, what an incredible school. I was in the United States classroom. I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. Then the bell ring started ringing and people started going from one classroom to another classroom into another one. I was like, oh my God, that looks like a market. Like there are so many people. What a shock. And then I go and I see soccer fields and I see a gym and I see computers and I see teachers. My life changed. And I fell in love with education. I felt safe. I felt like I felt like I could learn because I met Mrs. Wright, who was my 7th grade teacher, who told me that my past did not define my future, who told me that despite of my circumstances, that I could make it. And Mrs. Wright inspired me to be able to believe that I could become somebody. My family and I believed in education. Seeing my mother make tamales on the weekends, seeing her babysit other kids because she couldn't make it to my parent meetings because I had to have books and money for tuition. Seeing those sacrifices inspire me. And I became the first one in my family to graduate from high school. I remember the day that I graduated, seeing my mother and seeing my mother cry tears of joy, tears of pride. Seeing my mother tell her friends that I was graduating from high school was the most beautiful thing. I started feeling like education was giving me an opportunity to be able to bring pride to my community, to my family. And I graduated from high school. And then, because of teachers, because of counselors, because of systems of support, I enrolled at a community college in Lone Star in Houston, Texas. And I graduated with an associate's degree. And I remember that I would go to my community college classes, and I would put a lawnmower and a weed eater in the back of my truck. And after class, I would go work. Education is empowering. Education allows you to see an opportunity for the future and to know that the future can be better. I remember that I then had mentors who told me, Jose Luis, síguele, keep on going. So I applied to Texas A&M University in College Station, where I graduated with a bachelor's in math and science. But I come from a trash field. And I'm the same kid that experienced poverty and violence from a very different perspective. And I graduated with a bachelor's in math and science. And I'm a dreamer. And during that time, we didn't have the deferred action program. So my greatest nightmare became my greatest blessing because my limitations did not determine my future. My dreams were not undocumented. So I applied for a master's in English as a second language. And I graduated with a master's. And I still couldn't work because I didn't have a work permit. So I enrolled in a PhD in urban education. And I just completed a PhD in urban education. So for the last 13 years of my life, I have dedicated them to be able to learn and be able to develop my brain and be able to develop ideas and strategies that can bring hope to our communities. So it's such an honor to meet you. It's such an honor to connect with you because this is what I have been wanting to do. This is my heart. You have no idea how much I wish I could have the opportunity to be with you in person, to be able to see your eyes, to be able to see your hopes, because I know this is not my story. But I hope that through our stories, we're able to understand that we are not alone. The reason why I made it is because I had teachers who inspired me and served as mentors. Because I went to my student services to be able to ask for help and assistance, guidance. Because I stayed connected with my advisors. Because I knew people that were in positions of power and figures of authority at the college that could help me out and could introduce me to people that expanded my network so that more opportunities could arrive. When you see this, the reality of this is that I am a combination of everything that has gotten me here. I did not make it here alone. But what's most important is that although I have reached all this academic success, that although I now have a work permit and the ability to now actually exercise my passion to be able to speak on the power of higher education, that I'm able to provide to my family. What I have come to realize is that the power of higher education, is not only personal, but it's generational. It's generational because it will provide opportunities not only to yourself, it will provide opportunities to the people that you love the most. You see, what's most important about today is that today I am a father. Today I have a very beautiful 1-year-old daughter who actually wants to say hello to you. Say hi. Say hi, you see? Say hi. Hi. Hi, there it is. Bravo. Bravo, bravo. Qué bonita. And education has changed my life. And it has also changed hers. The way she gets to be raised, the way she gets to experience the world is very different than daddy did it. It's very different than mommy. Mm-hmm. High five. Yay. Say bye-bye. Say bye-bye. Bye-bye. And go. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye. And education has changed her life. And it has helped me understand the true power of education. As a first-generation college student that you are, I am so proud of you. Because when you started this journey, you had no directions, you had no map, you didn't know where you were going. So you created a journey. You started to figure it out. You understood you couldn't figure it out alone. And you started connecting, with your individual colleges. With the College of Waubonsie, with the College of DuPage, with the College of McHenry, the College of Morton College, of Black Hawk College, with the Crystal Lake City, with the state of Illinois. You started connecting and understanding that you're not alone. I just want you to understand that a higher education will provide you too a generational power. That many of you might choose to have a family or adopt or be able to help out your own families in their own native countries. And education gives you an opportunity to be able to have greater income, to be able to expand your networks professionally. It gives you an opportunity to be able to meet different people, but it also gives you an opportunity to fix the problems of where we come from. Today, my dream and my passion is to one day return to Honduras and to become the Secretary of Education for the country. Because I believe in the power of education. So now you believe me. Now you trust me. Now you know that it is possible because you understand my roots. Because you understand that an education changed me. But an education has the power to transform an entire nation, to be able to bring hopes to our communities. Most importantly, to be able to also create a generational impact for your families, for the people that you love the most. It's an honor to be with you. It's an honor to share my story, to share my experiences, to share my pain, to become vulnerable in an open book so that you can see the trajectory of my journey. So that as you hear Dr. Zelaya, that what you really hear is family. That as you hear Dr. Zelaya, that what you hear is community. That as you hear Dr. Zelaya, that what you hear is se puso pilas, tuvo ganas, quiso, le echó con todo. I am not an example. I am a sample of our communities. This is a reflection of you, of your powers, of your strengths. You see, I believe that every single one of you was already successful. Because whenever we talk about the concept of success, success is not something you do. Success is something you are. You are already successful because of the sacrifices of your family, because of your faith in education, because you believe that an education will provide you a better future. You are already successful. Walk through this life knowing and being confident that policies or that other realities do not determine your own reality. That you have an opportunity to rewrite your story through the permanent power of higher education. I am happy to be here. I am happy to connect. Thank you so much, McHenry Community College, for giving me this honor to be able to serve, to be able to put my dreams into reality. Because this is what I want to do, to be able to share how education changed my life so that our communities can also experience the generation of power of higher education. I'm happy to be here, to be able to connect. I'm going to share my social media handles for us to be able to just connect at a different level. I'm in the state of Texas. If any of you ever want to find information on how to transfer into a community, into a university in the state of Texas, whether it's Baylor, the University of Texas, Texas A&M University, whether it's Rice, whatever university you're thinking in the state of Texas, I am here as a resource. I want to be able to make sure that this is not just an empty motivational speech, but that instead that we bring essence to the equation and that we actually stay connected. I want to be here for you because the same way that I made it here because people were there for me. But now, I want to now engage into some questions. But check this out. Now into a little bit more of a light note. But remember how I told you that I arrived in the United States on December 8th? So on December the 8th, it was a little cold, you know, especially compared to Honduras, where we have a tropical weather, where it rains in the morning, the sun is at night, like it's crazy. So whenever you come to the United States, and it's like 60 or 50 degrees, like that's something like, oh, like you can't experience that, right? So it was crazy. So I remember whenever I got here on December the 8th, in the apartment where we used to live, like honestamente, I don't know if y'all know about this ones, but yo creí que éramos como los pitufos. I thought we were like the Smurfs because it was an entire village. So many people living in that one apartment. So one of the things that I started doing when I first came was that I used to crochet because I learned how to crochet in Honduras. And as I learned how to crochet in Honduras, the reason why I learned how to crochet in Honduras was because I would make beanies or I would make headbands that I would then go to stadiums and sell. And by crocheting, whenever I first arrived in the United States, I remember making beanies to the little kids that would live in the apartment where we were at. And all of a sudden, like, because, you know, they were getting them for free. They were getting beanies for free. All of a sudden, right, like my mom shows up and she goes like you're making beanies for free? To who? And I was like, para los niños aquí, to the kids here. And then all of a sudden she went to go talk to their parents and she was like, ya no los regala. Like he doesn't give them for free no more. Like he sells them. And I was like, because think, right? Like I'm thinking Honduran currency. And then all of a sudden, like the parents were like, you sell them? And I was like, yeah. And they were like, how much? And I was like, man, like $5. And they were like, okay, give me 4. And I was like, what? Like 4 beanies, like $20. So I really quickly, right, started crocheting and I would make the beanies. And all of a sudden, I remember going back to that man and being like, here are the beanies. And all of a sudden, that man started giving me a whole bunch of ones. Like he gave me $20 bills. I remember grabbing those $20 bills, like looking at them, grabbing them, throwing them in the air, like swimming in them. Because I was rich. I had $20. Like that was like thousands of lempiras in Honduras. Like, are you kidding me? That's a lot of money. And all of a sudden, right, like I go out to a store and I try to buy a Coke and a Coke was almost $2. I was like, what in the world is this? An entire different society. So I remember whenever I started selling them, crocheting stayed with me. And then whenever I went into my bachelor's at Texas A&M, I received over $100,000 in scholarships because I was resourceful, because I looked at institutional funding. I looked at corporate funding. I looked at grants. I looked at different types of opportunities in the university, outside of the university, because my mom told me, el que tiene frío, va a buscar una sábana para arroparse. He or she who's cold better find a blanket to cover up. So I wanted to go to school, and I knew that the number one systemic barrier would be finances. So I had to like create plans. So I had to be able to find money for school. So my bachelor's, I got over $100,000. I had a full ride. But for my master's, I was undocumented. And the university didn't really know what to do with an undocumented student in graduate school. They had no funding. So what did I do? Society told me that because of my status that I couldn't work. But society didn't tell me that I couldn't start a business. So I started making beanies and I started selling them everywhere. And all of a sudden, like the news started picking it up. And I would get calls from Don Francisco, from Jorge Ramos, from Primer Impacto, Al Punto, the New York Times, CNN. And they were covering the story of a dreamer crocheting to go to school. And all of a sudden, like they would take me to their TV shows, right? And I would walk in and I would do the interview. And all of a sudden, like I cared about the interview, right? Because it was cool. But what I cared about was how many beanies I was going to sell, because Dreamer had to eat. Like I had to pay for school. But my beanies were no longer 5. They were 15 plus shipping. You know what I mean? Because I had to pay for tuition. So crocheting became a thing. Became a thing that everywhere that I went, I would bring beanies. I would bring headbands and scarves. And one of the things that there is no way, you know, because we've been planning and we've been thinking a lot about, you know, this presentation and how we were going to share my heart, because everybody that was involved in this event has put a lot of time. Maybe you just logged in, or maybe you just took off some time, but believe me that people have been organizing this event, have been dedicating numerous hours so that you can have an opportunity and that I can have an opportunity for us to meet. So it's beautiful for me to be able to embrace this moment. And one of the ways that I want to is that I have sent bracelets like this ones, bracelets that I wear with me everywhere that I go, that I crochet, and I have sent bracelets for every single one of you, so that your leaders from your colleges can send them to you. Because I want you to have something made from my hands, to be reminded that whenever there is no way, that's okay. That whenever there is no journey to follow, that's okay. Part of being generation, part of being first generation is taking upon the responsibility of making a way. So we grab that responsibility because we know that there are people coming after us who are going to benefit from your sacrifices, from the challenges that you have experienced, and for the achievements that you have reached.